Welcome to the Prophecy Club. This past Sunday, I was talking to Bill Palmer, one of our been a congregation member of Spirit of Prophecy Church for a number of years, but he works in a nuclear power plant. He walked in with an amazing Geiger counter, and we're going to talk about it because this guy really knows nuclear. So, Bill, tell him a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Well, I work part-time in nuclear power plants. I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I'm technically considered a nuclear valve technician, and I work on components inside nuclear plants. And
You work inside a nuclear plant.
yes, that is correct. And being a nuclear worker, we're required to be familiar with types of radiation, radiation exposure, how to prevent overexposure and things like that. And we also know pretty much what can be used for shielding against radiation and what can't be.
Okay, now one of the things I was shocked to find out, we're talking about the suitcase nukes, my very finite knowledge on nuclear things, I said, my guess is what is really going on is these suitcase nukes that were smuggled here, according to Stanislav Lunev, back in the 80s. My guess is that they're probably pulling them out, dusting them off, pulling them out of, say, a lead-lined box or whatever, and you corrected me. Tell us about lead. Does it actually block radiation?
Yes, lead blocks all your radiation basically, especially gamma. Now that's the one that's the most dangerous out of all. And lead will block it, but you also have extremely dense concrete that will also block the radiation. But
What you said was the concrete is a better blocker than the lead.
No, not exactly. The concrete to be an efficient blocker has to be approximately 6'6" thick.
Ooh.
So lead being a foot thick will block more than the concrete will if the concrete's not up to those dimensions.
Okay, so one of the things they might have the suitcase nukes in is some kind of a lead container.
Yes, they could have.
So the Superman movies were correct.
To a point, yes.
Okay, now what my suspicion is, and let me just say I don't know for certain, okay? I mean, I'm just a prophecy guy, okay? But my suspicion is what's happening is that these 10 to 50 suitcase nukes that Stanislav Lunev said were smuggled into America back in the 80s they've been going in where they were hidden and opening up the box, pulling it out, dusting it off, testing it, make sure, and getting ready to put it into places where they plan to use it. Is that a reasonable expectation? In other words, they open the box, it's setting off Geiger counters in New Jersey, and New York City, and California, and other places. Is that reasonable thing?
That's a reasonable suspicion to have for sure, but you know, especially if they take them out of their containers that are shielding them and they start moving them around. Probably these drones are picking up
Are supposed to pick up.
or pick up radiation signatures. Now, the radiation detection equipment they have, especially what we have in the nuclear plants, is extremely sensitive. We could get a small particle of contaminated dust on us and go through a monitor and set it off. And so, I mean, just a tiny particle. And it's probably not as radioactive as what would be inside the nuclear bombs. But one thing about the nuclear dirty bombs, so to speak, they have radioactive fissionable material in there, but the real radiation occurs after it's detonated. That's when the real spike in radiation occurs. And that will primarily be neutron radiation for the initial blast, but that dissipates as soon as the reaction is over. And then after that, it's gamma, alpha, and beta.
And why do we need to know the gamma, alpha, and beta? Is that important for us? Let's say we're living an hour away from where a suitcase nuke goes off. Is it important to know that?
Yes. Now, the alpha and beta radiation, that's not a big issue. The big one to worry about is gamma. It's a higher energy radiation. It's got a short, what they call, wavelength, so it penetrates through a lot of things. Kind of picture like the old FM, AM radios. Okay, when you hit an AM radio in your car, you could drive through downtown and you wouldn't get a signal, right?
Right.
Because it was a long wavelength frequency, so it wouldn't bounce between the buildings and come down. FM is a very short frequency.
So no problem, it goes right through.
It goes right through. The same thing with gamma radiation. It goes right through. Alpha and beta can be shielded with your clothes, a plastic suit, even wooden structures will shield you from alpha and beta. But gamma will go through all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, show us your radiation detector there.
Okay.
You aren't going to believe this. This is awesome.
I think I moved it back.
So you got a pretty detailed detector there. Tell us about the detector. Raise it up and show us and tell us about it.
This detector is an old detector from 1962, and it was a civil defense radiation detector, and it's pretty sensitive, and it's still in calibration, and it still works. The only difference between the modern ones of today is it's not totally solid state, and it's heavy. But other than that, it works pretty good.
Okay, now we were talking Sunday, and you were telling me you had this. I was anxious to see it, and it's got a little gauge right there. So, can you turn it on and show them how it works?
It'll
there?
take a minute for it to warm up.
All right. Well, then while he's letting his warm up, so I went on to Amazon, and I ordered one because I talked to him. I thought, I'm going to believe God to protect me from all of that, but I think it's still good. I have a good idea to have one. So I went on to Amazon and I bought this one, and he's got, show him that little piece of.
There's a little test chip here on the side.
Right here.
To test if the
right there.
detector is working or not. That way you have a viable source of radiation that's really close to you. Now it's a mild source, it's a low source, and it's not hazardous to anybody.
I don't know if they can hear that.
You can hear it clicking
anyway,
off now.
This little thing, according to his little test piece of uranium, tests out to be pretty accurate. And I got it from Amazon. I don't sell the things, but for people that want to know what it was, there is the serial numbers and all of that. And he's tested this one out, and he says this is a pretty good one. I don't remember the price, $100, $150 or something like that. Now, why did I get it? Well, because I can see the time living in the DFW area. Suitcase nuke goes off downtown, and people coming out of that area, it might be nice to know who is radioactive, who is not. Once they've taken their clothes off and washed and showered and put on clean clothes, it might be nice to be able to run this over them and see if they're clean yet. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, back to what you were saying.
I'll show them. I'll hold it up where you can see the meter on this. When I place it next to the test strip, you'll see the gauge start to rise. Okay, that's
put it a little closer there so they can see it there.
Let me get this right up against that. You can see the gauge start to move. And that's this detector picking up the radiation from the test chip.
And it does click, but you have to have headphones to hear the click. And I don't want to fool with the headphones.
This is old school, so you got to put the headphones on, then you can hear it click just like Stan's was clicking. And one thing I'll bring up real quickly, he's talking about contamination. If you're in an immediate blast zone, or depending upon the prevailing winds, what causes the contamination is the dust that was stirred up because of the reaction of the dust from the nuclear bomb, or any debris that comes from that will usually be contaminated. Now, it will spread a certain direction for prevailing winds, but the farther it blows away, the weaker that contamination is. And the thing about the contamination is, if you're worried about it in your homes, like with central heating and air conditioning, what I would do is get a HEPA filter. Keep your doors and windows shut as long as you can. The HEPA filter will filter out any particulate matter that comes in.
Okay, so now my understanding is what you would do is dust off. Let's say you were around, somehow you got caught in some of this fallout coming down. You would dust before you got in your house, your car, you dust off as best you can.
Well, what I would actually do is before I entered my house, I would have a change of clothes somewhere, like in a plastic bag outside.
But yeah, that'd be the idea.
Take your clothes off, be very careful. Put a pair of gloves on, rubber gloves, just simple latex gloves. Take your clothes off, put them in another plastic bag, peel your gloves off, and then put your clean clothes on. That way you're not going to cross-contaminate. Because you get microscopic dust on your fingers, and when you touch your face or your mouth, you can get contamination internally.
Yeah, my understanding is that it just is very... It's like powder, and it just settles on everything. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, it just depends. Because like when I work in a nuclear power plant, we put on contamination suits. And what they do is that's just to keep us from coming in contact with any dust that might be in the area that might be contaminated from the continued exposure to the radiation. And the only thing that's not covered is our faces. And our hoods, our heads, everything else is covered. We wear special booties, special gloves, and we always take 2 or 3 pairs of gloves in. Like if you're down there and you're hot and sweating, you might have a drip of sweat or your nose might itch. Peel off the glove you're wearing, wipe the sweat, put a fresh glove on. That way you don't get any contamination on you or in you. And if you do have contamination on your body, don't take a hot shower for one. Take a cold shower. Hot showers open up the pores on your skin and allow the dust particles or whatever it is, the microscopic particles, to enter into the pores of your skin. And big thing is internal contamination. If you get a small amount inside you internally, it will pass through your system in just a matter of days and no problems. But the thing is, the biggest threat to us is not so much the contamination, but the radiation. Now, I'll go over what they call.
Okay, let me jump in here. Okay, my understanding is, what I've been told, is that this powder settles on everything, and one way or another, it's pretty hard to not get it absorbed even through your skin. And a simple solution is to get the potassium iodide pills, which of course Prophecy Club is offering, I might add. We've had to place 2 or 3 orders because we've been covered up with orders. One bottle is $20. You need 1 bottle per person per exposure from infant to adult. And you get $10 for $150. Go to prophecyclub.com, place your order. At last, I was told we have some in, but we don't expect those to last long. And we have already placed another order for more of them, and we have a source that can get as much as we want. Anyway, potassium iodide.
Yes, that's correct. That
right.
will help you from getting what they call radiation sickness from mild systemic overexposure to radiation.
Right.
Now, if you have acute exposure and it's at a certain level, like 10 rims or higher, 100 rims or higher, depends on the duration of your exposure.
But now one of these will tell you just how exposed you are, right?
It will tell you what the radiation levels in the area that you're in. It will explain. It will show you that. And you were asking me a question the other day at church about if you're driving down the road, can you open up the window and hold it out and see what kind of radiation you're around? Well, if you're driving around somewhere, I wouldn't open the window to begin with, because if you're opening the window, you might.
But it goes right through the window. In other words, you don't have to open a window.
No.
This will tell you what your radiation levels are.
Yes, exactly. Unless you're behind lead or a real thick concrete wall, something like that. Yeah, you'll get a reading on that. You'll definitely get a reading.
So you want to stay out of the fallout as it's coming down as much as possible.
Right.
But if you get a little on you, if you just dust it off, it's not that bad.
No.
But you do need to start taking the potassium iodide pills
Yes.
ASAP.
Yes.
So that it doesn't kill your thyroid, which kills you.
Right. That's just another safety measure right there that you need to do. Now, if you're 120 feet away from the blast area, you'll get a lethal dose anyway. You know, the blast may not kill you, but the dose of radiation you get.
Okay, how far away?
I would say within a half mile.
Okay, now let's talk about my understanding. I'm telling you what I've been told.
Okay.
And I've interviewed some people that are supposed to know. So some say the suitcase nukes are 1 kiloton. Some say that there is, one of the prophecies says, as much as 9 kilotons. I seriously doubt that, because the one that hit, and here's another thing, I can't get a straight story. Some people say Nagasaki, Hiroshima, one was 4K, the other was 11K, other sources. So there's conflicting answers there. But let's assume it's, say, a 1K kiloton, which takes out about a 10-city block downtown, turns it to 10,000 degrees, concrete or steel is vaporized. How far from that can you be before you are in danger, and what is the danger?
I can't give you an exact parameter on what your distance is away from it, but I know the farther away you are from the blast, the better off you are. Now, they have what they call a 7-10 rule. Now, this applies over time after the blast has happened, and I'll read it to you real quick. 7-10 rule is based on exposure rates determined by survey instrumentation by the NRC, and it states that for every 7-fold increase in time after the detonation of a blast, there is a tenfold decrease in the radiation exposure rate. Now, what that means is once a blast occurs, as time passes,
The
the
radiation,
radiation
starts going
level
down.
starts
And
going
that tells
down.
us how fast that radiation is going down
Exactly.
based upon how far from the blast we were.
Well, not necessarily how far. You could be, like, say, if you're 100 feet from the blast and the
You're in
radiation
trouble.
is, well, I'm just saying the radiation at that point in time is 100 millirem. 7 days later, it's going to be down to 10 millirem, just simply
Okay.
because radiation
Okay.
dissipates. It's like your light bulb. Well, I want to use that example, but it's like it just dissipates. Radiation
Got it.
tends to
Okay.
dissipate, okay? But I mean, as far as exposure, the closer you are to the source, now I'll use a light bulb example of this. If you're next to a light, it's really, really bright, and you can feel the heat coming off of it. But the farther away you get, the dimmer it is, and the less warmth you might feel from the light.
Right.
So the farther you are away from the source of radiation, the less contamination or I won't say contamination, the less radiation dose you will receive. And see, we have areas like that in nuclear power plant. We have what they call low dose waiting zones. We'll go into a high dose room where we're close to something in particular and it's emitting a lot of radiation. But if we're not working, we'll step back so many feet and stand in a low dose area so we don't get as much dosage as we're working.
Okay. What other suggestions do you have, assuming we have a high probability of seeing suitcase nukes near us soon?
Number one, the potassium iodide pills. I mean, they're not going to hurt to have them, and if something does happen, I would
Right.
rather have them than not.
Right.
Number two, store up a lot of food and water. Get
Right.
some food and water stored up for at least 7 days, because if you're anywhere around one of these blast deals, the infrastructure is going to be messed up for days, probably the banking system, everything else. Actually, I'd recommend a month's worth of food to begin with, and water. And, it doesn't have to be dehydrated food, doesn't have to be freeze-dried food, anything like that. Canned food. Simple. Meat for protein, vegetables, and the expiration date, or what they say is the best if used by date, they can be stored for 5 to 10 years past that date, and they're still safe. Believe me, I've done it. I do that. And it's sealed. You don't have to worry about any potential contamination getting in it until you open it, but you can eat it, no problem. The other thing about canned food is you don't have to have a heat source to cook. If you have dehydrated or freeze-dried food, yeah, you have to have a heat source to cook. But I mean, all three of them are great. MREs are great too. Yeah, definitely food and water.
Joseph Kitchen is a good alternative
It is.
too.
I've got.
You got some Joseph? I do too.
I do too, and I love the bread. It's awesome. It works great. And I mean, it's good, healthy bread. I love it. And when it comes to your water supply, make sure you have at least 1 gallon a day per person in your household.
Yeah, let's talk about the water. Now, my first question is, okay, so let's say we're pulling our water out of a puddle or where it's rained or where it's collected somewhere and we can see it's got some of that fallout in it.
Right.
Can we filter the fallout out and it's still drinkable water?
Yes, you can. Now, the contaminated dust and particles will be trapped in the filter, which means you'd have to change it fairly often because you don't want to pour water in there and that filter reaches its maximum ability and then you're actually getting contaminated water coming back down through the filter because it's not filtering out all the particles.
So if you get the fallout, whatever that might be,
Right.
out of it, the water itself is probably okay. It's not
Yes.
storing radiation then.
No, it could.
So water won't store radiation for the
long-
most part.
So, like say, the water has to be exposed to continuous radiation for a long time before it actually becomes radioactive. Now, if
Okay.
you're close to the blast, there'll be such a massive amount of radiation hit it all at once. Yeah, some of that water might become radioactive. But
So just filter it and you're okay.
yeah.
Okay, going back to what I was saying. Okay, let's say that we're out in our car, wherever, and because this is the highest probability. Now, if you're too close to it, you're dead anyway.
Right.
But say you're out in your car and you could not avoid it, but you've got dust all over you, this radioactive dust. You don't have an extra spare clothes. From what you're talking about, it sounds to me like the best thing to do is to dust off your hair and your clothes best you can. Get into your house, get somewhere where you get those clothes off, get into the shower and get yourself clean. And then you're probably okay? I mean, we probably can't guarantee that, but
No, I
probably.
can't guarantee that, but one thing I will bring into mind too, if you've got it on you, that's one thing. But you start dusting it off, you're putting it back up in the air around your nostrils and your mouth. You could possibly
Just
inhale
take
it.
your clothes off and shower.
That's why I would suggest don't try dusting off because all you're going
Okay,
to do is
okay, good point. Good
because you'll
point.
get it. You could breathe it in through your nose. You could take it in through your mouth.
Good point.
So you don't want that internal contamination. Now, if it's not a high level, like I said, usually within a week or so, if it gets in your lungs, it takes longer for your body to get rid of it than if it goes through your mouth and you swallow
But if
it.
even if you ingest it or get it in your lungs, you can still get the fallout out. But the radiation itself, does that stay or
No, the
no?
radiation passes through with the particles.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
it's not going to definitely unless that particle is emitting 100 rims of radiation whenever you swallow it, which I doubt that.
Okay.
Then as it travels through, well, it's going to be emitting radiation all through your body. But if it's a low dose contamination, it shouldn't cause any major problems.
Okay. This card came with this Geiger counter. And it says here, and I'm going to hold it up so you can see it in a second. 0 to 50 is normal, 51.99. It gives you the different levels here. I'll hold that still for a second so you can see it. Don't pay attention to my dirty fingernails. Don't look at my fingernails, don't do it. Okay. My point is, there's different levels. Now, 100, over 100, it says you high level, closely watch the reading, find out why. Why'd you get this? How'd you get it? Over 1,000, very high, leave the area ASAP, find out why. If it's over 2,000, you're in trouble. Extremely high, evacuate immediately, report to the government. Now, that's one of the reasons that's why I wanted to get this guy, because I'll be able to know, where we are with someone, because I fully expect, and I'm going to be making another program here shortly.
And if you notice on the card here, you've got the CPM,
Yeah.
which I'm not sure what that
Different
is.
levels, right?
Then you've got the cents per hour, and then you have the millirems per hour.
Yeah.
Now, where it says normal background, that's .003 to .033 millirems per hour. That's not bad. That's what we usually get just generally. And, it's got the little red or orange level there, .033 to .065 per hour. I get that when I'm working in a nuclear power plant. I usually get 1 millirem per hour, generally speaking.
Okay.
Depends on how long I'm in there. Now, that's not necessarily hazardous, initially. But if you do it every day, that's what you call
Then it accumulates, right?
that's what's called systemic radiation toxicity. And down here where it says 1.30, extremely high, evacuate immediately. That's high, but that's not life-threatening. What says evacuate immediately, I mean, get out of there. You don't need to stay there any longer, but as long as you get away from the source, that number will drop.
Okay, so essentially, from the whole interview, what I'm gathering is that radiation is serious,
Right.
but perhaps it's not as serious as we've thought it was. But there are some reasonable things that a person can do to see that it doesn't kill them,
Right.
right?
I'm going to give you something else here. Let me see what it says right here. Where'd I put it? Oh, basic radiation control methods. This is how you can control how much radiation you get. Sometimes you can mitigate these situations, sometimes you can't. It's called time, distance, and shielding. Time is how much time you spend close to that source. That's when those numbers go up on that card.
Okay.
If you're spending a whole lot of time next to a high dose source, you've got problems, okay? Distance, get away from it. Like I was telling you before, the example of the light bulb. Get away from it. That lowers your dose rate, okay? And then shielding, like I said, if it's gamma radiation, there's nothing you're going to put on that will shield you, but if it's just alpha and beta background radiation, your clothes shield you from that. But the gamma is the one that's dangerous. That's when they do x-rays with stuff like that. You can see it come through the body with the x-rays.
Now, if you get this guy, and again, I'm not recommending anything, but I'm glad I got it. He says this is a good one. Then pretty much where your levels are. It even tells you an ongoing level, how much radiation you've got over.
It's a continuous indication
Right.
meter that's on there.
I don't know all the words to make it explain.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But just if you get one like that, make sure you read the instructions very clearly. Make sure you know what you're reading when you look at it, and look up some basic information on radioactive contamination, radiation exposure, things like that. It's all over the internet, and sometimes it's kind of hard and confusing to understand it. Like, if you don't work with it, you don't understand it, it's kind of hard for me to explain to people, like dose rate, things like that. Like, I'll give you an example of dose and dose rate. Now, his Geiger counter there has a little deal about dose rate on it. Like, say I'm getting 1 millirem an hour, which is not much. And picture a faucet that has water dripping out of it. Blip, blip, blip. All the old radiation that's coming out is 1 millirem. That's all the more powerful it is. But if I open that faucet full force, then I get a higher dose rate. I get a higher amount of that 1 millirem per hour. And that could be dangerous, because when we work in the power plant, we have dosimetry on us. One of them reads the dose we're getting, the other one reads the dose rate, how fast we're getting it. And sometimes conditions change. You can get a faster dose, more of it, because we're timed on how long we stay exposed to this stuff.
But get away from the radiation as quickly as possible.
That's the best thing.
Okay,
Distance.
Bill, thank you for coming to Prophecy Club and explaining all this. Again, I recommend you go to prophecyclub.com, get yourself some potassium iodide pills, $20 a bottle, or 10 of them for $150. Also get yourself, there. We have water filters there. We have, of course, Joseph Kitchen. Use the promo code Prophecy, I think it is, and get yourself some food. Get yourself prepared for these things, because, in my opinion, there's a high probability that's what really is going on setting off the Geiger counters, is they're pulling out the suitcase nukes hidden back in the 80s, preparing to use them, and that's confirmed by several prophecies. God bless you. In 2021, I started making bread, and long story short is I believe God showed me that wheat is God's famine food, just like it was famine food back in the 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, days of Pharaoh and Joseph. And I believe that that's what God has planned to feed his people. And you get it by going to josephskitchen.com. 3 steps. First, you want to get a machine package. Second, you want to order 6 ingredients and watch some videos, download the recipes to be able to make the bread. josephskitchen.com. Most of your long-time storage food, emergency food, all of that, typically are talking $9,000, $10,000 to feed one person for a year. Joseph Kitchen can show you how to do it for around $1,000 a person, and your kids will actually eat it, and it's actually good for you. Here's some bread that I made. In my case, I lost weight, lowered my blood pressure, gives me more energy. I eat morning, slice in the morning, slice in the afternoon, always a slice before I go play racquetball. Go check it out, josephskitchen.com.